In the winter of 1952, London experienced one of the most catastrophic environmental disasters in modern history. For 5 days in December, a thick, poisonous fog descended upon the city, bringing daily life to a standstill and claiming thousands of lives. This event, which killed approximately 4,000 to 12,000 people, known as the Great Smog, would fundamentally change how governments approached air quality and environmental regulation, serving as a grim warning about the consequences of unchecked industrial pollution. To understand what happened, you need to know how much London depended on coal. For hundreds of years, people in London burned coal to heat their homes. By the 1950s, coal fires were everywhere. They kept houses warm, powered factories, and drove the industrial engine that had made Britain one of the world's great economic powers. Every winter, millions of coal fires burned across London, sending smoke up into the sky. London was famous for its fogs. Charles Dickens wrote about them extensively. He described the yellow-brown haze that would hang over the city. These fogs happened so often that people gave them nicknames. They called them pea soupers because they were thick and greenish-yellow, like pea soup. People in London just accepted these fogs as part of city life. But the fog that came on December 5, 1952, was different. This wasn't just annoying or hard to see through. This fog was a killer. The conditions that created the Great Smog were a deadly combination of geography, weather, and human activity. In early December, a weather system called an anticyclone parked itself over southern England. This created something called a temperature inversion. Normally, warm air rises and carries smoke and pollution away from the ground. But during an inversion, warm air sits on top of cold air and traps everything below it. London sits in a kind of natural bowl with low hills around it. These hills can trap air when conditions are right. With the anticyclone staying put and almost no wind blowing, the city became like a sealed box. Every bit of soot, every puff of smoke, every poisonous gas from chimneys and cars had nowhere to go. It all just sat there, getting thicker and thicker. The timing made everything worse. December in London meant everyone had their coal fires going all day to stay warm. But there was a problem with the coal itself. After World War II, Britain was broke and needed money badly. The government sold the good, clean-burning coal to other countries to pay off war debts. This left Londoners with cheap, dirty coal that made more smoke and more poison when it burned. There were other problems, too. The city had just replaced its electric trams with diesel buses. These buses pumped out exhaust fumes that added to the toxic mix. Power stations along the river kept churning out smoke. Factories kept running as normal. All of this poison piled up in the air with nowhere to go. When the fog first showed up on Friday, December 5th, most people didn't worry much. Fog was just part of living in London. But as the hours went by, it got thicker than anyone had ever seen. By Saturday, you couldn't see more than a foot in front of you in some places. People literally could not see their own feet when they looked down. This fog looked different from normal fog. It wasn't white or gray. It was a sickly yellow-black color, heavy with bits of soot and ash. It smelled strongly of rotten eggs because of all the sulfur in it. It left a greasy, oily film on everything it touched. And worst of all, it didn't stay outside. The fog crept into buildings through every crack and gap. It filled homes, shops, theaters, and even the underground train stations. Getting around the city became almost impossible. Drivers gave up and left their cars in the middle of the streets. They simply couldn't see where they were going. Bus workers walked in front of their buses carrying burning torches, trying to guide the drivers through the murk. The underground trains were about the only way to get anywhere, but even the tube stations filled with fog that drifted down from the streets above. At Sadler's Wells Theatre, they had to stop a performance of the opera La Traviata after the first act. The audience couldn't see the stage anymore. Movie theaters closed because the fog inside was too thick to see the screen. Sports events were called off. Criminals had a field day. Thieves robbed shops and stole from people knowing that nobody could see them in the fog. The chaos in the streets was bad, but the real horror of the Great Smog was invisible. With every breath, people in London were sucking in a deadly mix of poisons, the sulfur from coal smoke mixed with water in the air to make sulfuric acid. This acid attacked people's lungs and throats. Tiny bits of soot and ash got deep into people's chests. Carbon monoxide and other deadly gases built up to dangerous levels. The weakest people got sick first. Old people, babies, and anyone who already had breathing problems started to suffer. Hospitals filled up with patients who couldn't breathe. They had bronchitis, pneumonia, and heart problems. Doctors worked day and night, but many patients were too far gone to save. Funeral homes ran out of coffins, flower shops ran out of flowers for funerals. But while it was happening, nobody knew how bad it really was. People died quietly in their homes across the city, one by one. It seemed like lots of separate, unconnected deaths. Only after the fog lifted and officials started counting did the awful truth come out. In that 1 week, deaths in London shot up way above normal. At first, they said about 4,000 people had died. Later studies showed that number was way too low. Many people who got sick during the fog died in the weeks and months after. Their lungs were damaged and they couldn't fight off infections. Today, experts think the Great Smog killed somewhere between 10,000 and 12,000 people. Another 100,000 got sick. In terms of deaths, it was worse than any single bombing raid during World War II. Looking back, one of the most shocking things was how the British government reacted, or rather, how it didn't react. Even as people kept dying, officials tried to play down what was happening. They acted like it was just bad weather, just an accident of nature. They didn't want to admit that pollution had caused a disaster. There were reasons they wanted to look the other way. Coal was hugely important to Britain's economy. The coal mines gave jobs to hundreds of thousands of workers. Nobody wanted to tell people they couldn't burn coal anymore. The country was already struggling with shortages and rationing after the war. Telling people they couldn't heat their homes the way they wanted would make the government very unpopular. Some officials even questioned whether the fog had really killed anyone. They said many of the dead had been old or already sick. They would have died soon anyway, the officials claimed. This was a cold and heartless way to dismiss thousands of preventable deaths. For months, the government refused to hold an official investigation or do anything meaningful about air pollution. But pressure for action kept building. Newspapers printed stories about how many people had died. They demanded that the government do something. Doctors and scientists studied what had happened and wrote reports showing that air pollution was deadly. Members of Parliament asked hard questions. Regular people joined the call for cleaner air. One person who fought especially hard was a conservative politician named Gerald Nabarro. He didn't give up on the issue even when his own party's government wanted to ignore it. Nabarro was clever about how he made his case. He knew that talking about health alone might not be enough, so he also pointed out how much money smog cost the country. It damaged buildings, hurt businesses, and meant the health service had to treat lots of sick people. The economic argument helped convince people who might not have cared about health alone. Finally, in 1953, the government agreed to set up a committee to look into the problem. Sir Hugh Beaver led the group. They spent 2 years gathering facts and talking to experts. When they released their report in 1954, it was damning. It showed clearly how much damage air pollution caused. It called for new laws to fix the problem. In 1956, Parliament passed the Clean Air Act. This was one of the most important environmental laws ever written. The law set up smoke control zones in cities where people could only burn smokeless fuels. It gave local governments power to control what factories could pump into the air. It gave money to homeowners to help them switch to cleaner heating systems. For the first time ever, the British government said it had a duty to keep the air clean. Things didn't change overnight. It took years to set up all the smoke control zones. Many families kept burning coal for a long time after the law passed. Factories still polluted, but the direction was clear. Things were going to get better. By the 1960s, London's famous fogs were getting less common and less severe. The thick yellow pea soupers that had been part of London life for generations were slowly disappearing. Air quality tests showed that there was less sulfur dioxide and less soot in the air. Fewer people were dying from lung diseases. What happened in London became a lesson for countries everywhere. It proved that air pollution wasn't just a nuisance. It could kill thousands of people in just a few days. It showed that governments could regulate pollution and that things could get better if there was the will to change. Other countries looked at Britain's Clean Air Act and copied it. The United States passed its own Clean Air Act in 1963 and made it stronger in 1970. European countries developed their own clean air rules. The basic ideas from the London disaster became the foundation for environmental protection around the world. The air we breathe belongs to everyone. People who pollute should be controlled. More than 70 years after the Great Smog, air pollution still kills people around the world. The World Health Organization says that dirty outdoor air causes over 4 million early deaths every year globally. London no longer has the dramatic yellow fogs of the past, but scientists now know that even lower levels of pollution cause serious health problems. Tiny particles from car exhaust, nitrogen dioxide from diesel engines, and other pollutants still harm people in ways that weren't fully understood in 1952. In recent years, London has tried new ways to fight modern pollution. The ultra-low emission zone charges dirty vehicles for driving in central London. The city has invested in better public transport, bike lanes, and electric vehicles. Air quality monitoring is much better now, tracking pollution levels across the city in real time. These efforts show how our understanding has grown since 1952. The Great Smog was dramatic and visible. It killed quickly and obviously. Modern air pollution is sneakier. It causes long-term diseases and shortens lives in ways that are harder to see but just as deadly. The challenge today is keeping people focused on the problem, even when it's not as obvious as a choking yellow fog. For the families who lost loved ones in December 1952, the Great Smog wasn't about history or policy. It was personal tragedy. Thousands of Londoners lost their parents, grandparents, children, and friends in those terrible days. Many were buried in mass graves because funeral homes couldn't keep up with all the deaths. The Great Smog of London stands as one of the worst environmental disasters of the 20th century. In just 5 days, it killed more people than many wars. It changed forever how governments think about the environment and public health. The way Britain responded also gives us hope. When faced with clear proof of harm, the government eventually acted. The Clean Air Act and the laws that followed made the air much cleaner over the following decades. What had seemed like an unavoidable part of city life turned out to be a problem that could be solved. Today, as we deal with climate change and ongoing pollution problems, the lessons from 1952 still matter. Environmental problems can seem too big to fix, but they happen because of choices people make. And they can be solved through different choices. The thousands who died in December 1952 remind us what's at stake when we fail to act. The improvement in London's air since then proves that change is possible. The fog that covered London in December 1952 wasn't just weather. It was the result of decades of burning coal without thinking about the consequences. It came from a society that accepted pollution as the price of progress. When the fog finally lifted, it showed Londoners a choice. Keep going the same way or change direction. They chose to change, and the world is better for it.